if we want to change the default port of a well-known service like SSH, and we have SELinux enabled in enforcing mode, we can run into the following issue, which I want to highlight in this video. So now my SSH daemon is listening on TCP port 22, as you can see, and I am going to change this first, and I will show you what I am talking about. So let's open the sshd config file and change it from 22 to 2222, for example. And reload the new configuration file. So no error message is displayed. We could think that the service is now listening on port 2222. So let's check it. It seems like no SSH daemon is running in the background. And this is exactly the case what is happening here. If I pressed Ctrl D here and exited this SSH session, I would lose my remote access to this site. But SSH is really an intelligent service because the already established sessions won't get interrupted, as you can see. I still have access to the server, although the SSH daemon is not running, so I can correct my mistake. But my server obviously can't receive new requests on TCP port 2222. So let's check what is the problem here. Just as we guessed before, SSH is not running and the process is exited for some reason. Let's check the logs. Bind to port 2222 failed, permission denied. So we are not allowed to use this port. Our first suspect in these situations should always be SELinux. If we are using a Red Hat based distro like RHEL or Rocky Linux in this case, so we should check first if SELinux is enabled and it is in enforcing mode. We can do that with the se status command. In my case, it is running in enforcing mode, which is the reason that prevents us from changing the default port of SSH. The default policy is usually the targeted policy by default. There are others as well, but the targeted policy is already complicated enough. What it does is it assigns contexts or labels to everything a service can access. So files, directories, or ports in this case. So SELinux allows the SSH daemon to use only port 22, nothing else, and shuts down the process if it tries to use anything else. We could put SELinux into permissive mode with the following command. This wouldn't prevent to change the default port. It only logs the violations. But it is obviously not a great idea. We want to keep SELinux in enforcing mode, and prevent the violations. So we need the SEManage utility in these kind of situations. It is not always installed by default, but in my case it is. But it can be installed with the following package. It's called policy core utils-python-utils. So it can be installed with the DNF package manager like this. But in my case, it is already installed. So let's check what ports can be assigned to services using SELinux. So these are the ports we can use for various services. So let's filter this output for SSH. So only port 22 is allowed to use and nothing else. But we can change this also with the help of the SEManage utility. So we have added a new type or new label to TCP port 2222. It is this SSH underscore port underscore T. And the SSH daemon is only allowed to use ports with this type. So from now on, SSH can use port 22 and 2222. So if I restarted the SSH daemon like before, we wouldn't encounter the same issue, I believe. Now it is running properly and listening on port 2222 as we wanted.